Welcome, my wonderful listeners, to this episode of the Some Kind of Mystic podcast, where we explore the sacred, the strange, and everything in between that bridges the non-physical and mystical aspects of life with the very challenging and real experience of being a human on this planet at this time. Today's guest is Freya Dawson, a spiritual mentor, unschooling advocate, and fierce guide to rewilding the soul. Freya has a background that spans from the academic world of environmental law to the untamed shores of conscious parenting and oceanic communion. Freya's journey is one of radical transformation. Through her program, Rewild Your Soul, she invites others to unlearn the scripts that they've inherited and rediscover the wilderness within. She's swam with whales, walked with forest spirits, and raised her children without rules, living a life that flows from deep intuition and presence. If you've ever felt the call to break free from who you've been told you are, then this conversation is absolutely for you. Please welcome Freya Dawson to the Some Kind of Mystic podcast. Welcome, Freya, to the Some Kind of Mystic podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, thank you. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, and you're on the other side of the world, out in Australia.
It's been a beautiful hot day today. I've actually been out snorkeling this morning with some local sharks that are kind of friends with mine since I see them quite regularly. And it's been a beautiful day.
Oh, wow. I'm absolutely terrified of sharks. It's probably the only thing that I'm afraid of. And, now you've just given me the whole, I've even got saliva coming out of my mouth because it's like borderline phobia. It doesn't keep me out of the water. I have to admit that. But oh my gosh, when I go to Australia or when I'm going to be in Florida coming up, I'm like, this is challenging. So you say you're friends with them?
These are very chill sharks. Yeah, I go and visit them about once a week at the moment, and they're very, very zen sharks. They're very calm. They just cruise around, and you can dive down and get right up close to them, and it's a really cool experience. It's really adventurous, but it's also incredibly relaxing at the same time because they're so chill. It's beautiful.
So in terms of sharks, I don't even watch Shark Week for my fear of sharks. I don't think you call different sharks breeds of sharks. I think that's reserved for domestic animals. So is it species? What?
It's a species,
Okay.
yes. So they're grey nurse sharks.
Oh my God.
Anybody who knows about nurse sharks will know that they're very, very chill kind of sharks. But
all right.
they're big and they still look like sharks, so it's a bit exciting.
My goodness. Well, that's great because one of my questions was actually going to be about, but let's rewind. Let's rewind a little bit. All right. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And I know you worked in law for a long time. You have your PhD. So let's go back to the beginning of your story before your 2 decades of spiritual journeying. Let's put it like that. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I actually grew up with 2 atheist scientists, and so dogmatic atheists, very scientific materialism, but beautiful experiences in nature because they're both zoologists. So we were out in nature all the time. We were traveling the world. I had a lot of time to spend just floating in lakes and swimming in rivers and in the ocean and in the desert, and there were a lot of really, really delightful moments. But there was also this very heavy sort of scientific lens and a very heavy emphasis on academic achievement. So it was like, you're definitely going to university, you're definitely going to get a PhD, you're definitely going to end up being a university professor, no questions asked, end of story, So I dedicated myself to that quest for a long time. I really tried to be a very good girl, as you do. I'm the eldest of 3 kids, and I was trying to meet their expectations and do all the things. So, yeah, that was a really all-consuming sort of trajectory for a long time.
Yeah, and a lot of people can probably relate to that with sort of trying to live up to the expectations of their parents and not necessarily having the freedom as a young person to make their own choices in a very holistic, organic, and complete way, in accordance with their soul. So, we're listening to hear. So
Yeah.
what was the changing point for
Well,
you?
what I wanted just really wasn't ever on the agenda at all. I didn't even think about it. And
Mm.
I did study science and law, and I got the academic job, and I got the PhD, and I actually really I enjoyed being an academic, and I enjoyed the teaching. The teaching was really, something that I really enjoyed. And I also enjoyed the research because it's all about critical thinking. It's all about starting to question all the stuff you've spent years learning, basically. So I did have that background in critical thinking and particularly in a legal framework, starting to pull things apart and go, well, how does this system work and how does it not work? All that sort of thing. But really, everything was sort of sailing along fairly smoothly until I had my first child at age 35. And then everything just got completely turned upside down. It was just such a massive change in my world that I had no idea what I was doing at all. Like all that learning, all that academic, I mean, it was completely irrelevant and just didn't equip me for anything to do with raising a child. And then I had another one a few years later. Then I had two children, and I was just, yeah, it was full on. They're both very, very sensitive, intense, bright, inquiring, self-directed, spirited children that I had. And the emotional roller coaster that was coming out was just unbelievable. And it unlocked all this repressed emotion from my own childhood. Like the whole emotional landscape had been just squashed right down for me
Okay.
because, it was all about the head. It was all about, the life of the mind. And that meant the emotions had been just chum. And and now, Pandora's box had been opened. And there was years of sleep deprivation. There was years of kids just screaming and tantruming. And oh my goodness, it was just, yeah, it was wild. It was completely, completely wild. And I just came unraveled. I really did. Completely unraveled. And had to I had to find a way of surviving this
So
experience.
I have a very similar story because I came back to self when my daughter was born as well. I didn't have time. I was in a bit of a crisis. I had some postpartum depression. I had some stuff going on about the birth itself, so some trauma from that. And I didn't have time to go to therapy. Sort of like
Sure.
my first thought was like, I'm going to go to therapy, but you have a newborn that's depending on you 24 hours a day. You're not
Yeah.
really getting the support from your community. So you're like, where am I going to find an hour a week to go and get help? And I've realized I could find 5 minutes a day easily, which is why I started meditation. But there
Yeah.
was no way I was going to find 60 minutes in a week altogether.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, well, I need help. I need something. So I'll start meditating. And that's when things really started coming back online for me. So was it similar for you? What was your strategy at that point to get out of that sink or swim type of situation?
Yeah. Well, I hadn't wanted to go down the therapy path. I had already chosen an unconventional route because when I had my first son, I had a home birth. I had already decided that I wanted to be a parent who didn't, use the discipline, the authoritarian. I already knew I wanted to do things differently, and I didn't have a lot of faith in mainstream psychology at that point.
Okay.
So I was at a bit of a loss until one day when I was in a secondhand bookshop, a copy of Eckhart Tolle's book, A New Earth, basically fell off the shelf in front of me. And I picked it up. Like I'd literally had 10 minutes to go into this bookshop, on the way to the chemist because that was all the time I had in the day. But here was this book, which I brought home and I devoured. And it was like, my goodness, this is what I need.
Hey,
This is it. So I started practicing coming into presence. And I mean, that was a kind of meditation, really, but I was doing it in like crisis situations. When my child was having this massive meltdown, I knew the only thing I could actually do was be present, you know, to be fully present and to really dial up that energy and the ability to hold space.
Right.
So that was my sort of baptism of fire into understanding my inner energy field, understanding what presence is and how it's everything really. But
Mm.
it was actually just a survival strategy to start with.
And presence is uncomfortable. It does make you also stay with your feelings and stay with what's occurring in that moment. How would you define presence for someone who's listening that maybe has heard that word thrown around, but it's not really easy to grasp? What is it?
Yeah. Well, the way I define it is really who I am when I'm not thinking.
Okay.
So it's for me, it's all about getting out of my head and connecting with the energy field, with my energy field, with the energy field that we all are. But it's really essentially about discovering who I am when I'm out of my head. Who am I when I'm not thinking? So that was my pathway in. Mm.
Then you developed into a situation where you'd said you were already interested in doing things a bit differently with your children. How
Yeah.
come that inspiration came to you? Was it just something that was in you to start with, or did the idea
Well,
come from somewhere?
I think it was partly a reaction to my own upbringing and not wanting to do that to my own children. I mean, it was very conventional. It wasn't anything extreme, but I just didn't want to be that parent that said, you know, just do it because I said so, or threaten punishment or violence or whatever. So, but it was also coming out of my legal background and my legal research. I'd spent years studying the criminal justice system and the whole system of punishment. And, you know, I understood that whole system very deeply and how it's failing us so dismally. And I thought, well, I can actually make a difference if I decide I'm not going to go down that path. I'm not going to apply that conventional framework of command and control to my children. I'm going to start right here. And basically, I threw out the manual that I didn't actually have anyway and decided, okay, I'm starting from scratch. I have no clue. So I want to figure out how to do this differently, how to do it respectfully, how to be how to be present with my children without all those rules and regulations. And it was a pretty wild ride, I have to say.
Yeah.
You know, we're all learning on the job, right? We're
Right.
learning on the job. We're doing the best we can, and it, and and there's a lot of figuring out to do, but essentially there's also a lot of unlearning to do.
Mm-hmm.
So the other real breakthrough came for me when I discovered the work of Byron Katie, and that has been her work, which she calls the work, is a process of self-inquiry, which is a process for investigating and unlearning your belief systems and any thoughts that bring stress or conflict or struggle or suffering into your life. And there were a hell of a lot of those thoughts coming up. You know, I was getting all my buttons pushed, like
Sure.
every single one, you know,
I'm a
massively.
parent. I know exactly what it's like, and
Yeah, yeah.
it's minutely. I can't even say it's daily.
Exactly. They're like heat-seeking missiles
Yes.
coming to get those buttons right. They know where they are. It's just inevitable that you're going to get triggered. And so what the hell do you do with that? Like I was in this, you know, as I said, an emotional roller coaster. I was getting triggered. I was in reaction most of the time. And I ended up yelling and threatening and manipulating
Mm.
all the things that I'd said I didn't want to do
Okay.
just came pouring out of me because that's what happens with conditioning. It runs the show, right? That conditioning just runs the show until you can interrupt it and start to unlearn it. So I use this process of self-inquiry to start doing that, to start investigating when I had a reaction and when I was screaming and swearing at my kids. I would do this process of self-inquiry, which has to be done written down to really make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate enough to have a few friends who were also interested in this. And so we actually did it together, like we would guide each other through this process of self-inquiry. And it was all the more essential by that stage because by then I'd also started home educating.
Right.
The amount of stuff that I needed to investigate was huge because it's like the whole education system. Let's throw that into the mix too.
Okay. So
Yeah.
did you do a homeschooling type of situation or an unschooling type of situation, or was it a hybrid? How did it work out for you? I know a lot of people are interested in that as well.
Yeah, well, my eldest, when he got to 4.5, he was enrolled in a beautiful Montessori preschool, and he refused to go. Like he basically just flatly refused. I could not physically get him in the door of the preschool, and he just said, "Look, I just want to stay home with you and my little brother. I just want to stay home." And I heard that, and I thought, wow, okay, I hear you, and I have no idea what to do with that.
Right.
But the very next week, in one of these moments of divine intervention, I met some homeschoolers. I met some people in a park who were home educators and who are really friendly and chatted to me and said, "Oh, look, we've got this lovely homeschool group. Why don't you come along and meet us and see whether you like it?" And I thought, wow, that sounds cool. I went along. They had the most gorgeous group. Like it was kids of all ages. They had all the musical instruments and toys and craft and swings. And I mean, it was just this amazing sort of environment for kids. My kids were just like in seventh heaven. They were like, wow, this is fabulous. And I'm like, wow, this is interesting. This is doesn't look hard, but it was clear right from the beginning that it was going to have to be unschooling, which is interest-led learning, because my then 4-year-old was absolutely clear that he wanted to do everything in his own way and his own time, and he would not, don't tell him what to do at all, right? So unschooling basically puts the agenda back to the child and says, okay, well, what are you interested in? What do you want to do? We'll go with
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah.
And that's what we did for the next 17 years, basically.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So
Yeah, we did the
that's your
wild ride.
spiritual journey, really. It was through the auto
Absolutely.
reflection and through them being the teachers and
Yeah.
your own deconditioning, as your children being your leader, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So they were my teachers because they didn't have any of that programming and conditioning. They just wanted to live their best life. They just, had that natural curiosity. They wanted to follow their joy and just go for it. And so this is what all the spiritual teachers say, follow your joy, follow your passion. They were actually just doing it.
Right. Yeah.
And I was going like, okay, this is not in the school curriculum, but okay, let's go, because
Right.
of course, this was some time ago now, but they were really, really into the PlayStation and then the video games and all that sort of stuff. So their joy and their passion led them in some directions that again brought up all my stories, brought up my, like, how is this going to work? How will they ever learn anything? I mean, all my extended family were completely freaked out.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing this crazy experiment on our
Yeah.
grandchildren, which I
Mm-hmm.
was. They were completely true. It was completely true. Um,
Sure. But you know what? You know what the interesting thing is that the alternative, which is the mainstream, hasn't, as the experiment that it has been, proven to be successful either, right? Even though that's what we've been following for the past 100 years or whatever it is as a collective, which is super interesting because, yes, potentially, it's not even true anymore. People can get jobs after an education, but there has been absolutely no direction towards how does a human being find happiness and fulfillment in their own human life. And that has been completely ignored by what is considered the traditional education system, which to me is absolutely that experiment failed. there's nothing like useful left in the traditional route of education system, because you're not teaching kids to be happy, and you're not teaching them to have self-confidence, and you're not teaching them to follow their soul or to be good people even. That's also missing. There's absolutely nothing of value aside from, hey, look, now maybe I can have financial remuneration for the years I put in, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I know a lot of people are going to be listening to this and be like, well, what does she mean, no rules and no punishments? Maybe they'd be flexible on the punishment thing, but they'd be like, well, how does anyone survive without the boundaries of rules? Or how does the parent survive without,
Yeah.
like, what about bedtime? What about hygiene? What about what they're supposed to eat and their nutrition, et cetera, et cetera. So how would you communicate to someone who's like, that kind of sounds right inside of me, but I'm scared to death to implement this with my family?
Yes. Well, I was scared to death too. And there was, it was a wild ride, because you still need to have some problem solving processes, right? I didn't want to apply any rules, and I told my children right from their earliest days that I would never force them to do anything that they didn't want to do. I was not going to use force. I was not going to use coercion. I was not going to impose rules. But that didn't mean that I was going to just completely let them, walk all over me, which they mostly did. But there were times when I thought, no, no, hang a minute. What you want and what I want is in conflict here. So we need to have a process for sorting that out, right? Critical to my whole journey was learning a process of creative problem solving, which involve the children as equal participants in the process, and also, threw it open to the universe to help us find solutions, win-win solutions. So while we didn't have rules, we did come to agreements about, sometimes it was about bedtimes or about teeth cleaning, or it was about just how to get out of the house and get to things that I wanted to do, but, they might not have had as such a high priority. So, there were all those things, but there was a lot of time spent in process to come to those agreements. So it wasn't an easy path, but it was very empowering, because I had to learn to step up and express myself, particularly in a way that didn't, it wasn't about blame or judgment or fault finding. I had to just be clear about what I was feeling and what I was wanting.
Mm-hmm.
And for them, I mean, they didn't have any trouble being clear about that. So it was a long process of assertiveness training for me, because I'd been trained out that sort of clear communication, like, what am I feeling and what am I wanting? Well, who knew what that would have been way back when? But I had to actually tap into that, right?
Yeah.
So they had me in this process of assertiveness training and learning how to communicate in a new way and solve problems in a new way, so that we could cohabit in our home for all those years
Yeah.
without killing each other.
Yeah. And I love that also because, I think a lot of parents forget that while they're busy holding space for their children, and while they're busy, because a lot of parents now are softer than the previous generations, right? They
Yeah.
will hold a lot more space. They are trying to be a lot more present with their children. But I've noticed also what sometimes is missing is parental vulnerability with
Mm.
their children, or for
Yeah.
parental honesty with their
Yeah.
children. Mom or dad are sad and they don't really want to go into all the details, the nitty gritties of the big wide world and why they're sad. So when the little kid goes, hey, how come you're sad? Mom and dad go, no, no, I'm not sad. I just have something in my eye, or it's seasonal allergies or something. And the kid, unfortunately, knows because they're empathic.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
closer you are to birth, the more you are able to read emotion of those around you. And so that's when the sort of doubt of the connection comes in, because the same thing,
Yeah.
if your partner was constantly telling you that they weren't feeling the way they were feeling, and you could sense it, you'd be like, well, this is disconnecting us. They don't trust me. You'd lose
Yeah.
trust. And then on top of that, you'd be like, well, when do we get to the part where we're actually having a relationship? So your children are missing out by not seeing your vulnerability. But it sounds like you had to dive really into that with this
I did.
process of communication,
Yeah.
because you would have to say to them sometimes something along the lines of, listen, I don't want to go to the supermarket either. And yet I have to, because if I don't, in 3 hours time when it's dinner, we
Yeah.
won't have the stuff to make the pasta sauce. And that would be, maybe some parents will think, no, that's like over responsibilizing the children. But you know what? Children are really responsible anyway. And above all, for their own lives. So I really like this. And you spoke a little bit about your background in terms of finding Eckhart Tolle and finding the Byron Katie, but there's lots of other influences that you've studied over the years and that have
Yeah.
been part of your journey. And I
Yeah.
know that you're really, really connected with nature. Was that always
Yeah.
the case?
Hello, boys and girls. I'm just popping in here for a moment and interrupting this amazing conversation with a quick reminder that the Some Kind of Mystic podcast is currently brought to you by our sponsor, me. I'm the only sponsor of the show, and along with all of my YouTube content and some special programs I have, this is my free offering to the collective. It's a labor of love, and if you're enjoying it, your support really means the world to me. If you are feeling the desire to go deeper, however, here are a few ways that we can connect. There are one-on-one sessions with Vagrein or with myself as a coach. These are powerful spaces to ask your questions and to reconnect with your deeper knowing or to be guided in your day-to-day life. My brand new audiobook, Vagrein, Seeking Ends When Sharing Begins, is now available on Amazon.com and Audible for you to download. This is an amazing way to absorb the content of this transformative book and receive guidance on the go. I do have an event coming up called The Invitation of Now. Go over to the website at www.jpherman.com/events and sign up for your spot now. They are limited. If you are listening to this after June 19th, which is when that event is going to be live, then that same link will lead you to any information about my future and upcoming events. So www.jpherman.com/event. And lastly, if you haven't done it yet, don't miss the free 5-day Learn to Channel email series. It's a beautiful, gentle initiation into your own intuitive consciousness and learning to tap into your own ability to channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button immediately right now in this moment. Don't forget to do it. Really helps more and more people find this content. And I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below about what you're loving or share suggestions for future guests or episode themes. Now back to the show.
It was always the case because I had that upbringing with my parents who were always out, spotting the birds and the finch and it was a deep immersion as a child. And so I continued that even all through my years as a student and an academic. I mean, I lived in Darwin for 8 years, which is right in the very north of Australia, and it's really wild up there. But I had some incredible adventures in nature, and there were places in Kakadu National Park, which is one of the big national parks in the Northern Territory, where there was just this incredible sense of aliveness, that the whole landscape was pulsing with energy and entities and artworks, and it was just this incredible experience to immerse and walk in this wilderness which was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. So I had these incredible experiences, and I just love that. It's what nurtures me, and it's what brings me into presence more than anything else. So I wanted to continue those adventures, but while I was raising two kids who were pretty much obsessed with video gaming, there was a limited scope for that for a few years. I mean, I'm very fortunate that I live very close to the beach, so I could always go for a walk on the beach. I could always go for a swim, but it was, somewhat restricted for a while, but it isn't anymore. So I've branched out back into that
Yeah.
love of nature now.
I know you do a lot of swims, even in colder weather, and you have a special relationship with like dolphins and whales, sort of the sea mammals. Or is that the right way to put them?
Pretty much, yeah. I first swam with dolphins in Hawaii many years ago, and it was just a life-changing experience. Like the joy was just so amazing to experience their state of being and to actually have that open up my state of being into this joyful beingness was just beyond words. And so I just wanted more of that. And we have, of course, this beautiful coastline here. I have started for about the last 6 years. I swim every day, year round. There are often dolphins. I've only actually got to swim with them once here, which was amazing. That was actually just last year. But we have the humpback whales migrating up and down the coast here, and they come in very close. And you can see them with their babies, teaching them how to breach and jump around. Every single time I see them, it just fills me with joy and delight. So I wanted to get closer. Like I want to get really close. So yeah, 2023 was my first ever swimming with humpback whales
How
experience.
big are they compared to you? Like, I can't even get my head around how big they
Well,
are.
they're absolutely massive.
Like bigger than a bus, like bigger than a bus.
Yeah,
What, I
bigger
don't
than
know how
a bus.
big they are. I have no idea.
They're enormous. They're
Jeez.
absolutely enormous. And the first time I was sitting on the back of a boat, and there's this huge whale coming straight towards us, and the guy says, "Okay, hop in now." And I'm
Into
like,
the water?
I did. I hopped in, and it was incredible.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's really something that you can't describe. And
Wow.
it's just incredibly awe-inspiring. I mean, that's really the essence of it. It takes me into that state of awe, which is who you are when you're not thinking. You're this
Right.
open state of awe and joy and delight and like just, wow, that's life, This
Wow.
is,
Yeah.
yeah. It's really nothing can beat it, basically.
Not jumping in the water. If the sharks are bad enough, like just swimming things is not my cup of tea, let's say.
Yeah.
So, you have this really big connection to nature, and I know that you have also this program almost of rewilding your soul. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? What is that all about?
Well, it came about when I was out bushwalking at the beginning of 2023. I'd taken to going for bushwalks on my own. We call it bushwalking. It's hiking. We have some small mountains. We have beautiful forest here. I live in a place where we're blessed with beautiful beaches and forest. So I was walking up this mountain, on the top of this mountain, all by myself one day, and I got this download, just this intuitive message, which is you're going to take what you've learned raising your children and writing this book and teaching parents, and you're going to spread it to a wider audience, and you're going to do it here in the bush, in the forest. And you're going to call it Rewild Your Soul. And you're going to bring groups of people out into the forest and onto the beaches, into the sea, and you're going to help them unlearn their old conditioning and beliefs. And you're going to talk to them about presence, and you're going to talk to them about expanding their consciousness. And I was just basically sitting there going, okay, this is interesting.
It's like um
Like it really was
it's a
okay.
Moses moment. Yeah, you're like up on the hill, you get the download for
Yeah, I
sure.
got the download. And then I started walking down the mountain going, right, okay, I'm not quite sure where to go with this, but it sounds cool. And there was actually a group of women walking up the mountain who stopped to say hi. And they said, oh, we're from this new Facebook group called the Wild Women of Wollongong. We're doing bushwalks and we're out in nature and we're doing all this adventure stuff. Why don't you come and join us? And I thought, wow, that sounds cool. So I joined this local group, and it turned out to be the perfect audience for what I wish to offer. So it was literally just, it was all brought together in one afternoon. And that was 2 years ago now.
Wow.
It's evolved in all sorts of different ways since then. And since that time, I mean, I literally started running events the next month in the forest and have been doing so ever since. And it has evolved into a process. Like it's even got an acronym now, which is kind of cool, as well as a title. A process for the acronym is praise. So it's, P for presence, R for realization. It could be self-realization, but also the reactions that bring us out of presence. So I was, this is a process that I had been going through for decades, and now it sort of all came together. Come into presence. Notice the reactions that are pulling you out of presence. So do that emotional check, inner check. What am I actually feeling? And then the A is for awareness, awareness of what thoughts are associated with that emotion. If you're getting triggered, there's emotion and there are also thoughts. So what are they? And
Right.
bringing those into your awareness is not easy. Sometimes, we all have blind spots, and I've actually sought mentoring from Vagrein about this very issue. I was getting triggered by something in my family and I couldn't find what are the thoughts, what's the belief underneath that. So I go digging, and when I can't find it, I ask for help.
Did
So
they help? Remind me if they helped.
they help.
Okay.
Absolutely, they helped. It was brilliant.
Nice.
Really, really helpful. So, yeah, so becoming aware of what you're thinking and believing in that situation. And then you can bring that into the I, which is for inquiry. You can bring that into the process of self-inquiry and asking yourself, well, is that true? Is it really true? Can you absolutely know it's true what you're believing about that particular person or about yourself or the situation? And how do you react when you believe that? And how would you be in that situation if you didn't believe that? Or even if you believe the opposite? And this is also a process that Vagrion's talked about how to deal with your beliefs, deal with how you're feeling when you're believing this belief, and then how you're feeling when you believe the opposite or something completely different, and using your emotional guidance system
Yeah, to
to
figure out
figure
what's
out,
serving. Does
yeah,
this still serve you? Because every belief
exactly.
serves until it doesn't. So
Yeah, yes,
something is probably protecting you today. Like, for example,
yeah,
believing everyone in the world is out to get you. That might be a protective mechanism when that's necessary. But at some
yeah,
point, that becomes a restriction
yes,
for you to make connections.
yeah,
So, yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
yeah. And you can bring all your fears to this process. You can bring all your self-judgments. You can bring your judgments of other people, particularly, your partner, your child, your children, your parents, If you're judging people and really complaining about them, then that's something you can bring to this process. But I've also discovered for myself that self-judgment and self-blame was my biggest hurdle to get over. It was massive for me, this belief that I wasn't good enough, that I had to try harder, that I had to say the right thing, do the right thing, achieve more, all of that. Right. So actually inquiring into all of those beliefs has been an essential part of this rewilding journey, because unless you actually unlearn some of those patterns of self-judgment and people pleasing, you're in tunnel vision. Your
Sure. You don't see
possibilities
it.
are so limited. You don't see the possibilities for your life. You don't see the adventures you could be having. You don't see how wonderful everything is because you're seeing it through the lens of this belief system. So the I is all about doing the self-inquiry. The S of the praise is all about opening up to new solutions. So it really draws from this process of creative problem solving that I used to do with my kids. It was sort of like, okay, if we've got a problem, let's open it up to the universe, to the divine, to help us find the solution. Let's hand it over. Let's ask each other. Let's ask our mentor or whoever, for some ideas. And don't just have it in your head that you have to figure it out through thinking, because I absolutely love that phrase that's attributed to Einstein. You can't solve the problem from the same level at which it
Yeah,
was created, the same level of consciousness at which it was created. You
yeah.
have to open it up. You
It's
have
like
to
also
elevate
Abraham
it.
Hicks. Abraham Hicks, you can't get there from here. It really
Exactly.
is that
Yeah,
don't stay stuck in the problem.
yeah,
Start raising your consciousness to the level of the solution, and that's where it is. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that S is all about, and the process of in self-inquiry also opens up the space. It elevates your consciousness. It opens your mind to receive new solutions. And the E of the praise is all about following your excitement,
Mm.
going to explore. What do I really want? What lights me up? What brings me joy? And is there anything that I haven't yet resolved that's holding me back from that?
Well, yeah.
So actually getting to the E was sort of like the icing on the cake for me, because I'd been doing this work for a long time and I hadn't got to that point of going, so what do I really want?
Nice. Yeah.
I hadn't asked myself that. And so really it's just in the last 2 years that I've put that right front and center and gone, okay, what do I want? What do I desire? And one of the things I love about Vagrein is the way they talk about desire, not even being your desire, but it's all coming through you. It's all a download. It's all coming through you, and you get to choose, which bits you pick up and which bits you don't. But you don't have to think about it as, from this ego sort of
Mm.
narrow perspective of, I want to whatever.
Yeah.
It's actually all divine desire.
Yeah,
So
it is.
why not go for it? Really?
Exactly. Yeah. Take
Go
the
swimming with
responsibility
whales.
off.
Go swimming with whales, just go
Yeah.
for it. So
Or
I
don't.
just really took that and just dived in, literally.
Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. So back to downloads and to your moment on the mountain, on the
Yeah.
hill, whatever it was. That sounds like a very mystical experience. A lot of people are seeking that sort of thing out where the light just shines on you and suddenly etc. And then all of a sudden you're in that new part of your journey. What does the word mystic mean to you?
Well, to me, it means being willing and interested in going on an inner adventure, like wanting to explore within and not just out there. I mean, I love exploring out in the wild world, but I also love exploring within. You can open up whole new dimensions, whole new streams of information, whole new realms that yeah, it's way more exciting in there than it is out there, really. But it's taken me quite a while, because coming from that atheist, scientific materialist upbringing, that's materialist. There's nothing else but form, there's nothing else but this rock and that tree and what have you, and this
Mm-hmm.
body. So for me to start exploring the non-physical was really very adventurous within that context, and not something I talked to my parents about. It's something I'm absolutely passionate about now, and things are opening up in really surprising ways all the time. I've been
Wow.
very interested in channeled spiritual teaching for a long time, and I found Vagrein about 2 years ago as well. At around about the same time, this download occurred, and since then, I have actually received, these messages, and now I'm even receiving it in other languages that I don't understand. So
Wow.
it's got it's got more mysterious, and I have no idea where it's
That's
heading.
right. Now, Vagrin just gave me a note that it was you who asked the question about light language
Yes,
talking, correct? Yeah,
yes.
one of the live events. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. So I got to go listen back to that response and see what they told you.
Well, their response was very interesting, actually, because I said, well, basically, you don't necessarily even need to know
Mm,
what is being communicated, because you're just the vessel that it's coming through. They basically described, the body as like a musical instrument. You know, the divine is playing your instrument, and if you're the guitar, you don't know you don't need to know what's coming out. It's just coming out. So it's very much the process that you go through when
Yeah,
you're channeling.
it
You
is.
don't know what's being said. It's just all happening. So
Yeah.
I'm
But
kind of
I'm remembering presently like the visuals that I got with that transmission of the guitar. So
yeah,
it's funny how like I get a completely different experience than people
yeah,
who are on the other side. Yeah.
yeah.
Brilliant. Nice. Nice, nice, nice. So you also wrote a book. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. Can you tell people about that, where they can find it, and where they can find your Rewilding program
Yeah.
and what's on offer?
Okay, so yes, I did write a parenting book arising out of all those years at home with my kids. Basically, I wrote the book that I would have liked to have right back at the beginning when I just said, what the hell, I'm starting from scratch. I would have liked to have this book because it's very much about the skills that I acquired as I went along. Um, skills in problem solving, listening in presence, in unlearning your old beliefs, all those sort of things. So it's not a book about advice. It's a book about here's some tools that will be really helpful to you if you want to approach parenting in this unconventional way of, treating your children as equal beings in this adventure that you're having together. So it's called Joyful Parenting, and the print copy is only available on my website, which is freyadawson.com.au, and it's also available on Kindle from Amazon. And so that's all available on my website. I have in the last 2 years, as I said, started this Rewild Your Soul process, and that is still evolving, and I'm still building a new website for that. But it's going to happen soon. And I'm also very much present on Facebook as Freya Dawson, and I am on Instagram as Rewild Your Soul. So they are places where people can get in touch with me and follow what's going on. And I run these local events in national parks, a whole lot of adventures on offer in my local area, but I also use this process, the Rewild Your Soul process, in my one-on-one mentoring, which I mentor, people internationally. So I encourage them to get out into their local environment, of course, but I can't go with them all the time.
Right. But if they are in New South Wales, they can check out when you have your next event on or you're doing
Absolutely.
another one
Yes.
of these things.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And
Yeah.
get in touch with you via any of those
Yeah.
channels. That's amazing. So if there's someone out there, and let's have you really feel into it, that is meant to, right now in this moment, hear something specific from you, what is that message you're wanting to give to them to connect with them with?
I would want people to know that it is possible to unlearn your old beliefs. You're not stuck with them. And you're not stuck with the institutions like domestication, the educational stuff. You're not stuck in that. You can unlearn it and you can forge a path through all of that stuff to find a way that works for you and your family. And you can follow your joy and you can start right now.
I also want our listeners to know that we had the wonderful opportunity of getting to meet each other in person last year in Terme in Italy. Did you enjoy that experience?
I loved that. It was so cool. I had an amazing year last year because this Rewild Your Soul idea lit me up so much. It really opened up my adventurous nature. So I went on this massive trek in the jungles of Meghalaya in India. And then I hopped on a plane to Italy to come to the Vagrein retreat, which was one of those inner adventures, but it was
Yeah.
also absolutely beautiful to meet all the people from all over the world who were gathered there. And yeah, just to be with the soul tribe, was an amazing experience. And to meet you and your team and your family, it was just wonderful. And yeah, that set the ball rolling for me to then go exploring off around Sicily, and I went to another spiritual retreat in Thailand in December. And
Wow.
Yeah, it's opening up beautifully, and I'm planning to go swimming with humpback whales in French Polynesia
Ooh,
in August.
my goodness.
Yeah, like the adventures keep opening up, and having the connection with Vagrein there as part of that journey is just so precious to me because yeah, I really think of them as my spiritual mentor in a
Beautiful.
very intimate and personal way, which is it's just very precious. I'm really deeply grateful for the role you've played in that and for everything that they have to offer.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. And I love that, you mentioned earlier in the conversation that you hadn't yet stepped into the following the excitement and exploring, but now it sounds like that's the chapter that's really opened up for you. And I mean, everyone can just benefit even from like little bits and pieces of that. If you can't get out to your, national park, you can get out to the garden, the botanical gardens in your city, or you can get out
Absolutely.
to the small thing that brings you that joy will expand. Saying yes to your passions or to your
Yeah,
adventurous side will
yeah,
allow more opportunities to come through you.
yeah.
And I think you're living proof of that.
Yeah. And everybody's different, of course. It might be music or art or crochet or cooking or whatever, but you can do it. You can
Yeah.
start it now. So, yes, things just keep opening up for me, and I'm absolutely delighted at how it's going. And yeah, bring it on. I don't know what's happening, but bring it on. I'm up for it.
Well, thank you so much, Freya, for joining us on Some Kind of Mystic. It has been my absolute pleasure. I'm so happy I got to connect with you again, and hopefully we'll get to do this again soon.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey with Freya Dawson on the Some Kind of Mystic podcast. If something in this episode stirred something in you, I'd love to hear about it. Leave a comment or even just drop an emoji of something wild from nature if you made it all the way to the end. And if you're enjoying this podcast, please take a moment to like, subscribe, leave a review, give it a 5 stars, because it really does help more than you know, and it's what allows me to keep bringing in these fresh, beautiful voices to share with you. Until next time, stay open, stay curious, and keep listening to that voice of the mystic within. Sending you all my love, and see you again soon.
Even though I love, guiding people in the bush, sometimes I've got hopelessly lost and ended up at the bottom of a ravine covered in leeches, not having a clue where I am, and having this whole group of people go, okay, Freya, where are we going to go next? So yeah, there's been some interesting moments in the journey.
I feel like that's a metaphor for life too, though, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Being covered in leeches. And yet
Yeah.
somehow you
Leeches.
climb out and you can figure it out again.
Sometimes there have been lots of leeches.
Oh my gosh. Tell me about it.
And they're more scary to people than any number of sharks or whales or dolphins or anything because they suck your blood. So people freak out. They really do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so crazy. Well, thanks again.